Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. Recently, Gambit has come into frame as a character who deserves more from his seasonal uniform and should be stronger, and we should have a hashtag justice for Gambit and all of this sort of things. That is the, I wouldn't say it's like the overwhelming majority of the community, but I would say it is the loudest, thing coming from the community surrounding Gambit and surrounding the response to him. That seems unified, right? Some players are happy with his performance, other players skipped him outright, but the majority of it is thinking that he should be stronger. And I kind of puzzled over this for a while. I watched some videos. Obviously, I didn't tier for him myself for different reasons. But what we have to understand here is Gambit is still good enough to replace Cable for 1 day of ABL. Now, that may not be enough for some players, and it certainly isn't enough for some players. But in the same vein, Bullseye just replaced Gwenpool, who replaced Mystique, who replaced, Red Goblin, Green Goblin, for 1 day of ABX. So in that way, he isn't so bad. But that actually isn't what I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on the 1 day of ABL. What I want to focus on is the fact that Gambit replaced Cable with a similar build for the same piece of content, despite the fact that if you go into my details page for Gambit, he has 25% Pierce. But then if you go into my details page for Cable, and you'll see where this is going, he has 35% Pierce. That's weird. And that is because, of course, we have the Team Up Collection. And the Team Up Collection gives extra Pierce, right? I have the Team Up Collection maxed out for X-Force, and there is Cable in the X-Force Team Up. Well, where's Gambit's Team Up Collection? Is it in the Sinister Six one? Or Midnight Suns? Symbiote? Avengers? Guardians of the Galaxy? Nope. There is no Team Up Collection for Gambit. So this is actually what I want to talk about, and this is what's kind of blowing my mind, is players are, in some way, they're rightfully upset that characters aren't stronger. Listen, I think Hawkeye should have been stronger, and Hawkeye has a Team Up Collection. I think Bullseye could have been a little bit stronger, and he doesn't have a Team Up Collection. But here's the main thing. Gambit is as strong or stronger than a character who has access to an additional up to 40% attack and 10% Pierce. That's a huge number. And remember, the majority of players who are replacing Cable with Gambit are top ABX ABL players. So naturally, they will tend to have a higher team-up collection for X-Force than casual players or just intermediate players, which means that their Cable's even more stacked than the average, right? I have a maxed out one, but probably a lot of you watching, most of you watching don't. Your X-Force team-up probably looks like this, or maybe it even looks like this. So your Cable might only have 3% more Pierce than Gambit and 24% more attack. And Gambit is still better, right? And this brings up an interesting point. There are close to a dozen very meta characters, close to meta or very, very meta characters that have zero team-up collection. Now, sure, there are characters that have team-up collections and they're very good, in part because of it, like Null, like Wolverine, like Doctor Strange, right? A lot of people argued, hey, maybe Doctor Strange wouldn't be replacing Magneto if Doctor Strange didn't have a team-up collection. Magneto's actually on my list, along with Gambit, of characters who are very good despite having no team-up collection. And I think this is what a lot of people forget. The team-up collection adds a lot, especially for PvE content. It adds a lot to the character. So let's take a look at some other characters who are very good despite having no team-up collection. Sentry's a big one here, probably the biggest. A lot of people, well, some people I've seen complained since Null came out that Sentry's no good anymore because Null is better. Well, Null is better because he's also 6 months younger or 5 months younger than Sentry. He came out after Sentry, and we know the law of power creep, right? The more recently they've been released, the stronger they're going to be in comparison to older characters. You have to make characters stronger as the game progresses, otherwise it's hugely boring. But you have to combine that with the fact that Null has access to a team-up collection. That's extra stats, extra Pierce, etc. that Sentry simply does not have. And we may see the return of Sentry even without a new uniform if they release a Thunderbolts team-up collection, because just having access to the additional Pierce, attack, and other stats could bring Sentry more in line and more balanced versus Null. Another example of a character that's meta or near meta in this case for multiple days of ABX and ABL, Scarlet Witch replacing characters like Captain Marvel, who has a team-up collection, despite having none herself. Another example of a super, or not super meta, but near meta character with no team-up collection, Jean Grey. A lot of other top-tier mutants, Wolverine, Cable, Deadpool, Storm, they all have a team-up collection. Does Jean Grey? No. And yet she's still insanely strong for PvE and pretty good for PvP. Imagine how much stronger she'll get even if she doesn't get a uniform when she gets that additional pierce, when she gets those other additional effects. Another one that I passed by, but it also makes sense, is Thanos. Not quite as strong as most of the other characters on this list, but the fact that he was holding on earlier this year in PvP despite no team-up collection versus characters who have it, it was honestly pretty impressive. We've already talked about Magneto. Another huge one that kind of go hand in hand, Luna Snow and Sharon Rogers. Some people were not really impressed with this uniform, and I understand it's a paywall uniform, and I understand there's not a lot of content outside of World Boss and GBR that she's available for, but when you compare her to other blast types, you are comparing her usually to characters who have a team-up collection. Or in Luna's case, even the comparison to Gamora, sure, Luna's uniform is paywall while Gamora's isn't, and I do feel for Gamora, but Gamora has a team-up collection. So the fact that she can't even keep up, despite having 3% or 5% or 10% more pierce than Luna, just speaks to how busted this uniform is, and imagine how much more busted it'll get when she finally gets a team-up collection. A character that I hate, but honestly, you gotta give him a little bit of respect for it. No team-up collection and still cranking out ABX, ABL hits, Loki. Yeah, even with Null's team-up collection and a Brilliant Rage, I'm still not able to catch up with Loki's scores. Clearly, he was made for the game mode, but it also highlights that there's more to a character than just one part of their build, right? It really is a connection of different things that come together, but you can still have an overwhelmingly strong character because one aspect of their build is just so synergistic with one piece of content. In this case, the way they designed Loki's uniforms recently, with the way that the fifth skill works, it makes him hugely strong for ABX, ABL specifically. And then we have somebody like Human Torch, where he hits super duper hard, often compared to Miles. Miles recently got a huge upgrade from the team-up collection, but Human Torch has yet to get his. And it kind of brings into question whether that's what the Fantastic Four are missing. Now, I do hate to say that because we've gone from the character is missing the uniform, to the character is missing the right CTP, to the character is missing like good cards and swords, to now the character is missing a team-up collection. So you could have every other aspect of the character maxed out. Odin's Blessings, Engraved Glory Hole Blessings, Tier 4, maxed out Artifact, Mighty CTP, Brilliant CTP, and still you could be held back by the team-up collection. That is a bit of a depressing thing to consider. I personally, I don't think that's the case for the Fantastic Four. While I do think the team-up collection will help them, I think ultimately the design choice was flawed in giving the artifact effect to Franklin and that part of his kit, rather than making it a part of his kit and not his artifact, and making it such a low, duration, 2 to 4 seconds. It should have been 5 seconds or 6 seconds, and it should have just been built into his passive so that you didn't have to get the artifact. But I think that's just sort of the marketing team and the greed of Netmarble taking over and kind of ruining a character. I do think it'll be rectified to an extent when the Fantastic Four get their movie uniforms, and we'll see if maybe they also combo that with a team-up collection. We actually have a few MCU properties this year with Captain Falcon, who is not in a team-up collection yet, and Red Hulk to an extent, but then also Thunderbolts, who none of which are in a team-up collection, and the Fantastic Four. So it'll be interesting to see how many of them get team-up collections, because they only release 3 team-up collections per year. In the first year, we had Midnight Sun, Sinister Six, X-Force, and then last year, 2024, we got Guardians, and then Avengers, and then Symbiote. So we can only get 3 more, and all 3 of those movies, right, Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four First Family, they're all slated for the first half of the year. So at least one of those groups is probably not getting a team-up collection, unless they get really creative with it and they make like a Thunderbolts plus Brave New World kind of combo thing. Given how many crossovers there are in Marvel, it's honestly possible, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe Hawkeye, Bullseye, and those kind of characters will finally shine once they have a team-up collection. Who knows? but I just thought it was an interesting discussion, and it's an interesting thing to think about when you evaluate the power level of a character, right? Because in the case of Gambit, I actually think he's better than people are giving him credit for. And in particular, if your account is not giga stacked, he is going to do so well because he's bringing all that to the table without having these extra buffs attached to him. So yeah, I wanted to put that out there as part of the conversation. I wasn't really seeing that mentioned, and I think we don't really appreciate these team up collection list characters enough. You can see some of these characters as honestly a roadmap for newer accounts who want to get a lot of power quickly with a small investment. Because really you just need to build the character and get the uniform. There's a few exceptions here, like Jean Grey, obviously, because of the epic quest. But otherwise, you're just looking at building up the character and not having to worry about these, tokens, farming ABX, ABL, spending money for token selectors, etc. Because all of the power is housed within the character and the build that you made. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say today. Yeah, you could still say Gambit needs a little bit of a buff. I think they could make him a little bit easier to play, a little bit easier to cancel, and that would probably be good. But realistically, he's not going to get more than a 5 or 10% buff because whenever he gets his team up collection, he's going to get that much stronger. And then there's going to be an even bigger gap between him and whoever else is there. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about the topic. Thanks so much for watching. Smash the like button if you enjoyed it, or the thumbs down if you hated it. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.